When I asked my parents for help with tuition, they didn't argue. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't even look disappointed. They simply said two words: be independent. At that moment, those words didn't sound like advice. They sounded like a goodbye. My name is Lily Anderson, and I was 18 years old when my life quietly split into two parts before that sentence, and everything after it. I remember the exact place it happened. Our kitchen. Small, clean, familiar. The hum of the refrigerator in the background. Morning light coming through the window like it was just another ordinary day. I had no idea I was about to lose something I didn't even realize I depended on. I grew up believing my family was solid. Not perfect, but safe. We weren't wealthy, but we never worried about food or electricity. My parents believed deeply in discipline, responsibility, and earning your place in the world. They were proud of being self-made and expected the same from me. As a child, I tried hard to be worthy of that pride. I studied constantly. I stayed out of trouble. I followed rules. I was the kid teachers liked and neighbors praised. I believed naively that if I did everything right, support would naturally follow. College was my dream. Not just any college, my college. I wanted to study business, to understand how ideas turn into impact, how effort becomes opportunity. I imagined myself building something meaningful one day, something that proved I deserved every sacrifice made for me. When I got my acceptance letter, I cried in my bedroom, holding the paper like it was proof that my life was finally beginning. But dreams don't come with price tags you can ignore. Scholarships covered some of the cost. I had savings from part-time jobs, but it wasn't enough. There was a gap. A painful, undeniable gap between ambition and reality. Asking for help wasn't easy for me. I had never been the type to ask, but I believed this was different. Education wasn't laziness. It wasn't irresponsibility. It felt reasonable. So I asked. I laid out the numbers carefully. I explained my plan. I talked about working while studying, about paying them back if needed. I spoke calmly, logically, like a future business student presenting a proposal. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then my father leaned back slightly and said it. "You're an adult now, Lily. You need to learn how to be independent." My mother nodded softly. She didn't add anything. She didn't argue against it either. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger, not hatred, disappointment. I realized that independence, to them, didn't mean support with guidance. It meant standing alone. I didn't fight them. I didn't beg. I nodded, thanked them for their honesty, and went to my room. But that night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't scared of working hard. I was scared of being invisible. I wondered if independence was a test, if succeeding alone was the only way to earn recognition, and if failing meant I had simply proven them right. The next morning, I woke up with a strange clarity. If no one was going to save me, I would save myself. I found a job, then another. I built my schedule around survival. Early mornings, late nights, long days where exhaustion felt permanent. I learned how to stretch meals, how to walk instead of taking buses, how to smile through stress because no one else needed to see it. I learned quickly that independence isn't glamorous. It's lonely. It's choosing work over rest, bills over comfort, responsibility over youth. But it also does something powerful. It strips away excuses. Every time I paid a portion of my tuition myself, something hardened and strengthened inside me. I stopped seeing myself as a child waiting for approval. I started seeing myself as someone capable even when it hurt. Still, there was a quiet ache I never talked about. The kind that asks, why wasn't I worth the help? I didn't know then that those two words would become my fuel. That the independence I was forced into would eventually build a version of me my parents never imagined. And that 9 years later, the story would come full circle. At 18, all I knew was this. I had no safety net, no shortcuts, no guarantees. Just myself and a decision to keep going. The first semester nearly broke me. On paper, my plan looked strong. Full-time classes, 2 part-time jobs, strict budgeting, 0 social life, maximum discipline. I told myself that if I just worked harder than everyone else, I'd be fine. Reality was louder than my plan. My morning started at 4:45 a.m. The alarm would cut through the dark, and for a few seconds, I'd forget who I was. Then it would hit me. Tuition, rent, responsibility, independence. By 5:30, I was tying my apron at the coffee shop near campus. The smell of roasted beans became part of my identity. I memorized regular customers' orders, smiled through exhaustion, and learned how to function on autopilot. "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" I said that sentence hundreds of times a week. By 8:30 a.m., I would rush to class, hands still faintly smelling of caramel syrup. I'd sit in lectures fighting to keep my eyes open while professors explained concepts I desperately wanted to understand. I loved learning. That was the painful part. I wasn't struggling because I didn't care. I was struggling because I cared too much. In the evenings, I worked at the campus library front desk. Quiet hours, soft footsteps, the hum of printers. Sometimes I'd look at other students studying calmly, laughing softly with friends, and I'd wonder what that kind of balance felt like. I didn't resent them, but I noticed the difference. They had safety nets. I had spreadsheets. Every dollar I earned already had a destination before it reached my account. Tuition installment, dorm payment, textbooks, groceries. There was no extra. There was no breathing room. The first time I transferred a large tuition payment from my own earnings, I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time. I expected to feel proud. Instead, I felt tired, not physically, emotionally. Because independence, I was learning, wasn't just about money. It was about carrying pressure alone, not having anyone ask, "Are you okay?" in a way that meant they were ready to help. I called home occasionally. Short conversations, updates about classes, weather, nothing deep. They would say things like, "We're glad you're handling things." Handling things. That phrase felt heavy. There were nights I cried in the dorm bathroom because it was the only place I could lock the door. I would sit on the cold tile floor, back against the wall, and let the tears fall silently. Not because I wanted to quit, but because I wanted someone to notice how hard I was trying. Midway through the semester, my body started protesting. I got sick. Nothing dramatic, just exhaustion catching up. Fever, headache, weakness. I missed 2 shifts at the coffee shop. 2 missed shifts meant less money. Less money meant stress. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, calculating how to recover financially before I even felt better physically. That was the moment I realized something important. Independence doesn't pause when you're tired. It doesn't care if you're overwhelmed. It keeps demanding. So I adapted. I started tutoring classmates in introductory business math. It paid better than the coffee shop per hour. I negotiated for more library hours during exam season. I cut every unnecessary expense, streaming subscriptions, takeout meals, even small comforts like occasional coffee from another cafe. If I was going to survive this, I needed to think strategically. Slowly, something changed. I stopped seeing myself as a victim of my circumstances. I started seeing myself as a problem solver. When money was tight, I didn't panic, I calculated. When schedules clashed, I reorganized. When exhaustion hit, I learned how to prioritize ruthlessly. It wasn't glamorous growth. It was survival growth, and survival teaches fast. By the end of that first year, I had paid my tuition without asking again. Not because I didn't need help, but because I refused to hear those 2 words twice. Be independent. Fine, I would be. But independence was shaping me in ways I hadn't expected. I was becoming sharper, more observant, less emotionally reactive. I started noticing inefficiencies everywhere in businesses, in systems, even in how students managed their finances. At the coffee shop, I realized we were wasting inventory because of poor tracking. At the library, I noticed students struggling with scheduling study rooms during peak times. My business brain, the one I had dreamed about developing, was waking up. Struggle was forcing me to pay attention. One evening, while closing at the coffee shop, I stood alone behind the counter, counting the register. The store was quiet, lights dimmed. Outside, students walked past laughing, carefree. For the first time, I didn't feel left behind. I felt ahead. Not financially, not socially, mentally. While others were depending on comfort, I was building resilience, and resilience has compound interest. I didn't know where this path would lead. I didn't know how long I could sustain the pace, but I knew one thing clearly. If I could survive this year, I could survive almost anything. Independence had stopped feeling like rejection. It was starting to feel like training. Hard, unforgiving, lonely training, but training nonetheless. And somewhere deep inside me, a quiet thought began forming. Maybe one day, they'll see what this made me become. Maybe one day, those two words won't feel like abandonment. Maybe they'll feel like the beginning. I just didn't know yet how far that beginning would take me. By the third year, something inside me had fully changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was evolving. The exhaustion never fully disappeared, but I learned how to manage it instead of fearing it. My days were still packed, my nights still short, but my mind was sharper, calmer. I no longer panicked when unexpected expenses appeared. I adjusted, I adapted. Independence had stopped feeling like punishment. It had become my default mode. I moved out of the dorms and into a small off-campus apartment with 2 roommates. It was cheaper, louder, messier, but it was freedom. I negotiated rent. I read contracts carefully. I tracked utilities down to the cent. Adult life didn't arrive suddenly. It grew slowly, through repetition. During this time, I picked up a new job, part-time work at a small local marketing firm. It started as an unpaid internship. I almost didn't take it. Unpaid meant risky, time-consuming, uncertain, but something told me this was different. The firm was tiny. 5 people, no fancy office, just cramped desks, loud keyboards, and big ideas. I was supposed to handle basic tasks, emails, scheduling, simple research. Instead, I watched everything: how clients were pitched, how campaigns were priced, how mistakes were handled or ignored. And I noticed something important. They were good at creativity. They were terrible at systems. Invoices were late. Client communication was inconsistent. Tasks overlapped. Time was wasted. I didn't complain, I observed. At night, after work and classes, I started writing notes. Not for them, for myself. I sketched better workflows, simpler pricing models, clearer communication structures. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was training my mind. One afternoon, the firm nearly lost a client because of a missed deadline. Tension filled the room. Everyone blamed timing, workload, confusion. I hesitated. Then I spoke, not emotionally, not dramatically, just calmly. I explained what went wrong. Step by step, I showed where the process failed and how it could be fixed. The room went quiet. The owner stared at me for a long second and said, "Why haven't we been doing it this way?" That was the first time someone in a professional setting truly listened to me. Not as a student, not as a struggling worker, but as someone with insight. They implemented my suggestions. The client stayed. Something shifted again. They started giving me more responsibility, paid responsibility. I helped redesign workflows. I handled client follow-ups. I learned how value is created not by effort alone, but by clarity. Around the same time, I started freelancing. Small projects, social media management, simple business consultations for local shops. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time, I wasn't trading hours for money, I was trading solutions for money. That difference mattered. I noticed how my parents' voices lived quietly in my head, not in anger, but as pressure. The unspoken expectation that independence meant silence. No asking, no leaning. I hadn't asked them for help in years. They noticed. "You seem busy," my mother said once on the phone. "I am," I replied. And I was, but not just busy, focused. By graduation, I had no debt beyond what I could manage. I had savings. I had experience. More importantly, I had confidence rooted in evidence, not hope. While others were terrified of life after college, I felt ready, not excited. Ready. After graduation, the marketing firm offered me a full-time role. I declined. That surprised everyone, including me. But I knew something they didn't. I wasn't built to grow inside someone else's system. I was built to build my own. I took a risk and went fully independent, freelancing, consulting, slowly increasing my rates as my results improved. It was unstable, scary, unpredictable, and familiar. Independence had prepared me for uncertainty. The first year after college was rough. Some months were great, others were terrifying. I learned how to pitch myself, how to say no, how to price my value instead of apologizing for it. Failure became information, rejection became feedback, loneliness became space to think. One night, sitting alone in my apartment, laptop open, invoices sent, I realized something profound. I wasn't chasing success anymore. I was building alignment between who I was and how I lived. The girl who once sat at a kitchen table asking for help had disappeared. In her place was someone who trusted herself, someone who didn't need permission. I still didn't know how my story would end, but I knew I had crossed a point of no return. Independence had stopped being a response to rejection. It had become my identity, and without realizing it, I was getting closer to the moment where everything past and present would collide, where those two words would finally be answered, not with anger, but with results. Success didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived quietly, in invoices paid on time, in referrals, in clients saying, "We want to work with you long term." By year 5 after that kitchen conversation, I wasn't just freelancing anymore. I was running a small but growing consulting agency. What started as me and a laptop had turned into a team of 6, remote, efficient, focused. We helped small businesses fix what most people ignored: structure, systems, clarity. I wasn't the loud, flashy entrepreneur type. I didn't post motivational quotes every morning. I solved problems, and businesses paid well for that. The first time my company crossed 6 figures in annual revenue, I stared at the financial report in silence, not smiling, not celebrating, just absorbing it, because I knew what it really meant. It meant the 18-year-old girl who was told to be independent had done exactly that. But independence had evolved. In the beginning, it meant survival. Then it meant resilience. Now it meant leadership. Managing a team was different from managing myself. When I was alone, failure only affected me. Now, payroll depended on my decisions. Other people's rent, other people's stability. That responsibility didn't scare me. It sharpened me. I built the company the way I wished my early college life had felt, structured but supportive. Clear expectations, transparent communication, no guessing games, no silent pressure. If someone on my team struggled, we talked about it. We solved it together, because I had learned something important. Independence should build strength, not isolation. Around year 7, things accelerated. A larger regional company hired us to overhaul their internal operations. It was our biggest contract yet. High stakes, high visibility. We delivered, not perfectly, but strategically. Efficient systems, measurable improvements, real results. Word spread. Suddenly, I wasn't chasing clients. Clients were chasing us. My calendar filled months in advance. I started speaking at small business events, panels, workshops. I shared what I had learned not from textbooks alone, but from living under pressure. People called me disciplined, focused, self-made. That word self-made always landed strangely. Was I self-made? Technically, yes. But the truth was more complicated. I was shaped by pressure, forged by necessity, motivated by something deeper than ambition. I was still trying to answer a question I never voiced out loud. Was I enough now? During this time, my relationship with my parents remained polite but distant. We spoke on holidays, occasional dinners. They knew I was doing well, but we didn't discuss details. They had never asked how hard it had been. I had never told them. There was no dramatic confrontation, no emotional apology. Just quiet space between us. One evening, after a successful conference talk, I returned to my hotel room and looked out over the city lights. I felt proud but not satisfied, because success doesn't erase old memories, it reframes them. I thought about that kitchen table again, about how small I felt, how unprepared, how hurt, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain when I remembered it. I felt gratitude, not for the rejection, but for what it forced me to discover. Without that moment, maybe I would have taken an easier path, a safer one, A supported one, maybe I wouldn't have learned how capable I truly was. Independence had given me more than financial freedom. It had given me self-trust, and self-trust is rare. By year 8, my company expanded again. 10 team members. Larger contracts. A small office space downtown, minimal, modern, efficient. The day I signed the lease, I ran my fingers over the desk in my private office and allowed myself a small smile, not because I needed validation anymore, but because I had built something real, something sustainable, something mine. Yet deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished. There was still a chapter waiting, not about money, not about business, about closure. Because independence had made me strong. But strength without reconciliation can quietly turn into distance. And distance, if left untouched, becomes permanent. I didn't want permanent. I wanted understanding. I just didn't know how or when that moment would come. Until year 9, the year everything changed. Not financially, not professionally, personally. And when it happened, it wasn't dramatic. It was simple. A phone call I didn't expect. One that would bring the past back into the present and finally give those 2 words a new meaning. The phone rang on a quiet Tuesday evening. No urgency. No drama. Just my mother's name lighting up the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Not out of anger, out of habit. Our conversations were usually short, polite, predictable. But something told me to answer. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded different. Softer, older, tired in a way I hadn't heard before. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words pulled me back instantly. Not to fear, but to awareness. I listened carefully as she explained that my father had been laid off. After decades at the same company, restructuring had made him excess. The word landed heavily. The same system that once preached independence had finally